there comes a quiet moment in life when you realize that no matter how much you give to others, no matter how much you try to be enough for the world, if you are not enough for yourself, you will always feel empty. From a very young age, you are taught directly or indirectly that your value depends on how others see you. You learn to read faces, to notice approval, to avoid disapproval. A smile makes you feel accepted. A frown makes you question yourself. Slowly, without realizing it, you begin to shape your behavior, your words, even your identity around what will be liked, what will be praised, what will be accepted. At first, it feels natural. You think this is how connection works. You give a little more, adjust a little more. Silence parts of yourself. If they seem inconvenient, you become skilled at sensing what others want from you, but at the same time, you become distant from what you truly want for yourself. This is how the habit begins. Seeking validation outside, you start measuring your worth through reactions. How quickly someone replies to you, how much attention you receive, whether people choose you, praise you, include you. And when they do, you feel a temporary sense of relief, as if, for a moment, you are enough. But that feeling does not stay. It fades quickly, leaving behind a quiet need for more approval, more recognition, more reassurance. And so you continue the cycle. What makes this pattern so powerful is that it is subtle. You may not even notice how much of your life is guided by it. The decisions you make, the way you present yourself, even the things you tolerate, are often influenced by a hidden question. Will this make others accept me? But there is a cost to this way of living. When your sense of worth depends on others, it becomes unstable. Because people are unpredictable. Their moods change, their opinions shift, their attention moves elsewhere. And when they withdraw their validation, even slightly, you feel it deeply. You begin to doubt yourself. You overthink. You wonder what you did wrong. In reality, nothing about your worth has changed. Only the reflection you were relying on has shifted. This is the illusion. You are not seeing yourself directly. You are seeing yourself through the reactions of others. And reflections can be distorted. When you rely on external validation, you give others silent control over your emotional state. A kind word can lift you. A small rejection can break you. You become dependent on something that is never fully in your control. And over time, this creates exhaustion. Because no matter how much validation you receive, it is never enough to create lasting peace. It always requires renewal. It always asks for more. There comes a moment, however, when you begin to see this clearly. Not as an idea, but as an experience. You notice the pattern, the constant seeking, the temporary highs, the quiet emptiness that follows. And in that moment, a question arises. What if the approval I am chasing is something I have the ability to give myself? This question changes everything because it shifts your attention inward. Instead of asking, do they accept me? You begin to ask, do I accept myself? Instead of wondering, am I enough for them? You begin to explore, am I enough for myself? At first, this feels unfamiliar. You are not used to being your own source of validation. You may even resist it because you have spent so long looking outward. But gradually, with awareness, something begins to shift. You start noticing your own efforts. You begin to acknowledge your own growth. You speak to yourself with a little more patience, a little more understanding. And slowly, the need for constant external approval begins to loosen its grip, not because others stop mattering, because They are no longer the foundation of how you see yourself. You begin to stand on something more stable, something quieter, but far more powerful, your own recognition. There is a common misunderstanding when it comes to loving yourself. Many people confuse it with arrogance, with thinking you are better than others, with placing yourself above the world. Because of this misunderstanding, they resist self-love. They fear that if they accept themselves fully, they will become selfish, careless, disconnected. But true self-love is not about elevating yourself above others. It is about no longer placing yourself beneath them. It is not loud. It does not need to prove anything. It does not compare. It is quiet awareness, awareness of your thoughts, your emotions, your patterns, awareness of what nourishes you and what drains you, awareness of where you are acting from truth and where you are acting from fear. Without this awareness, you move through life unconsciously. You react instead of respond. You follow habits you never questioned. You say yes when you mean no. You stay where you feel unseen, unheard, or unvalued, simply because you have not paused long enough to recognize what is happening within you. Self-love begins the moment you start paying attention. You begin to notice how certain environments affect your energy. You see how some conversations leave you feeling heavy, while others bring clarity and lightness. You recognize the difference between what feels aligned and what feels forced. And instead of ignoring these signals, you begin to respect them. This is where awareness becomes powerful, because once you see clearly, you can no longer pretend you do not know. You cannot unfeel what you have felt. You cannot unsee what you have recognized. Yet many people still choose to ignore this awareness, not because they are weak, but because they are afraid. Afraid of change, afraid of losing connections, afraid of standing alone. So they silence their inner voice. But every time you ignore that voice, you move further away from yourself. You begin to live a life that looks acceptable on the outside, but feels disconnected on the inside. You perform instead of express. You adapt instead of align. And this creates tension within you. Self-love is the courage to face this tension honestly. It is the willingness to sit with yourself and ask difficult questions. Why am I feeling this way? Why do I keep repeating this pattern? What am I avoiding? What do I truly need right now? Not to judge yourself, but to understand yourself, because awareness without compassion can turn into harshness. You may see your flaws and begin to criticize yourself even more. You may become impatient with your progress. You may expect perfection, but real self-love includes gentleness. It understands that you are shaped by your experiences, that your patterns did not appear without reason, that your fears are not random, but learned. So instead of attacking yourself for where you are, you begin to meet yourself there. You allow space for imperfection. You stop demanding that you always be strong, always be certain, always have everything figured out. And in that space, something begins to soften. You start to trust yourself more, not because you are perfect, but because you are honest. Honest about your limits, your needs, your emotions. You begin to respect your own boundaries, not as a way to push others away, but as a way to stay connected to yourself. And this changes how you move through the world. You no longer act just to please or to avoid discomfort. You act from understanding, from clarity, from a deeper connection with who you are. This is not ego. Ego seeks to be seen, to be praised, to be superior. Awareness seeks to be real. And when you live from awareness, you do not need to prove your worth to anyone. You do not need to compete for value. You simply recognize it within yourself, quietly, steadily, without resistance. This is the essence of self-love. There is something within you that is more valuable than time, more subtle than attention, and more easily lost than both. It is your energy. Every thought you think, every emotion you feel, every interaction you engage in requires energy. And yet, most people move through their days without ever considering where this energy is going. They give it freely, often unconsciously, to people, situations, and habits that slowly drain them. At first, it is not obvious. You may feel a little tired, a little distracted, a little unmotivated. You might assume it is just part of life. But if you look more closely, you will begin to notice patterns. Certain conversations leave you feeling heavy. Certain environments make your mind restless. Certain people, even without doing anything directly harmful, seem to take more from you than they give. This is the quiet cost of unprotected energy. When you do not pay attention to where your energy flows, it begins to scatter. It is pulled in different directions, toward pleasing others, overthinking situations, holding on to past experiences, worrying about things that have not yet happened. And as it scatters, your sense of clarity weakens. Your inner stability begins to fade. You may still function. You may still fulfill your responsibilities, but internally, there is a constant sense of depletion. Protecting your energy does not mean withdrawing from the world. It does not mean isolating yourself or becoming indifferent. It means becoming aware of what deserves your presence and what does not. This awareness requires honesty. You begin to ask yourself simple but powerful questions. Where do I feel most at peace? What consistently drains me? Which interactions leave me feeling aligned, and which leave me questioning myself? The answers are often already within you, but you may have been ignoring them. Sometimes you stay in draining situations out of habit. Sometimes out of obligation. Sometimes out of fear of disappointing others. You tell yourself, it is easier to tolerate discomfort than to create change. But every time you choose comfort over truth, you spend energy, not only in the moment, but afterward. When you replay the interaction in your mind, when you feel the weight of what was left unsaid, when you carry the tension with you into the rest of your day. Over time, this becomes exhausting. Protecting your energy means recognizing that not everything requires your response. Not every opinion needs to be challenged. Not every invitation needs to be accepted. Not every relationship needs to be maintained at the same level of closeness. It means allowing yourself to step back without guilt. This can feel unfamiliar at first, especially if you are used to being available, helpful, or accommodating. You may worry about how others will perceive your change. You may feel a sense of responsibility to continue giving, even when it costs you. But self-love asks for a different approach. It asks you to consider your own well-being as essential, not optional. When you begin to protect your energy, you start to notice a shift. Your mind becomes clearer. Your emotions become more stable. You feel less reactive, less overwhelmed. You regain a sense of control, not over the world, but over how you engage with it. This does not mean your life becomes free of challenges. Difficult situations will still arise. People will still have expectations, but you respond differently. You no longer give your energy automatically. You give it intentionally to what matters, to what aligns, to what supports your growth and your peace. And just as importantly, you learn to keep some of that energy for yourself, for rest, for reflection, for simply being without needing to perform or prove anything. Because when your energy is protected, your presence becomes stronger. Not louder, not more forceful, but more grounded. You are no longer easily pulled into unnecessary conflict or distraction. You are no longer as affected by things that once drained you. Instead, you move with a quiet sense of direction, not because everything around you has changed. Why? Because you have become more careful with what you allow to take from you. There is a voice within you that speaks quietly, often without words. It does not shout. It does not demand attention. And because of this, it is easy to ignore. Yet it is always present, guiding, warning, reminding. This is your inner voice. From early on, you begin to lose connection with it. Not because it disappears, but because other voices become louder. The expectations of family, the opinions of society, the desire to be accepted, all of these begin to shape your decisions. And slowly, you start to trust what is outside more than what is within. You second guess yourself. You hesitate. You look for reassurance before taking even small steps. And when your inner voice speaks, you question it. You wonder if it is valid, if it is logical, if it will be accepted by others. So you silence it. But silencing this voice comes with a cost. Because your inner voice is not random. It is shaped by your experiences, your values, your deeper awareness. It notices what your mind may overlook. It feels what your words cannot fully express. When something is not right, it signals you through discomfort, unease, tension. And when something aligns with you, it brings a sense of calm, clarity, and quiet confidence. Ignoring these signals creates conflict within you. You may say yes when everything inside you says no. You may stay in situations that feel wrong, convincing yourself that it is the right thing to do on the outside. Everything appears normal, but internally there is resistance. This resistance does not go away on its own. It builds over time, turning into frustration, confusion, even regret. You begin to feel disconnected, not just from your decisions, but from yourself. Listening to your inner voice requires stillness, not physical stillness alone, but mental space. A willingness to pause before reacting, to sit with a feeling instead of immediately dismissing it, to ask yourself, what am I truly feeling right now, without rushing to change the answer. At first, the voice may feel faint. You may not trust it. You may confuse it with fear or doubt. But the more you pay attention, the clearer the difference becomes. Fear is loud, urgent, and often chaotic. Your inner voice is calm, steady, and simple. It does not try to convince you with force. It simply shows you what is true for you. And when you begin to listen, truly listen, you start making decisions that feel aligned, even if they are not the easiest. You stop betraying yourself for temporary comfort. You begin to act in a way that reflects who you are, not who you are expected to be. This is how trust is rebuilt, not in one moment, but gradually, every time you choose to listen instead of ignore. There is a subtle habit many people carry without realizing it. A need to explain themselves, to justify their choices, their boundaries, their feelings, as if their worth depends on being understood and approved by others. You say no, but then you feel the urge to add reasons. You set a boundary, but then you soften it with explanations. You make a decision, but then you look for reassurance that it was the right one. Behind all of this is a quiet belief. If they understand me, then I am valid. But your worth does not come from being understood. It does not increase when others agree with you, and it does not decrease when they don't. When you truly know your value, something changes in how you carry yourself. You no longer feel the need to over-explain simple truths. You understand that not everyone will see things the way you do. Not everyone will recognize your intentions. Some may misunderstand you completely, and instead of trying to correct every perception, you begin to accept this reality because you realize that being understood by everyone is not only impossible, it is unnecessary. What matters is that you are clear with yourself. Clarity replaces the need for validation. When you are unsure of your own decisions, you seek confirmation. You look for others to tell you that you are right, that you are justified, that you are allowed to feel the way you feel. But when you are grounded in your own understanding, that need begins to fade. You still communicate. You still express yourself, but it comes from a place of sharing, not proving. There is a difference. Proving carries tension. It comes with an urgency to convince, to defend, to make others agree. Sharing is calm. It allows space for others to have their own perspectives without feeling threatened by them. When you stop explaining your worth, you also stop negotiating it. You no longer tolerate disrespect just to be accepted. You no longer shrink your boundaries to avoid conflict. You no longer adjust your identity to fit into spaces that do not recognize your value. This does not mean you become rigid or closed off. It means you become steady. You choose where to invest your energy. You decide which conversations deserve your attention and which do not. You learn that sometimes silence is stronger than explanation because not every situation requires your voice, and not every person is willing to understand it. There is a quiet strength in knowing who you are without needing others to confirm it. It allows you to walk away without long justifications, to say no without guilt, to stand firm without raising your voice. And in that stillness, your value becomes clear, not because you demanded it to be seen, but because you no longer needed it to be proven. There is a tendency to look outward when things feel uncertain, to search for someone who will reassure you, guide you, or hold you steady when your emotions begin to shift. It feels natural to want support, to want someone to lean on. But when this becomes a constant need, you begin to lose something essential, your ability to stand on your own. When you depend entirely on others for stability, your inner state becomes fragile. It rises when they are present, when they are kind, when they are available, and it falls when they are distant, distracted, or gone. Your sense of balance is no longer yours. It is tied to something outside of you. Becoming your own source of stability does not mean rejecting others. It means no longer relying on them to hold you together. It begins with learning how to sit with yourself, especially in moments of discomfort. Instead of immediately reaching out to escape what you feel, you stay. You observe. You allow the emotion to exist without rushing to fix it. At first, this can feel unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. You may feel the urge to distract yourself or seek reassurance. But as you remain present, you start to realize something important. You are capable of handling more than you thought. You begin to understand your emotional patterns. You see how feelings rise and fall, how thoughts come and go. And in that awareness, you discover a quiet strength. You start to respond instead of react. You give yourself time before making decisions. You become less impulsive, less dependent on immediate comfort, and slowly trust builds, not in the world around you, but in yourself. And so, after everything you have seen, everything you have felt, everything you have begun to understand, you come back to one simple truth. The relationship you have with yourself shapes every other relationship in your life. If you abandon yourself, the world will reflect that abandonment. If you doubt yourself, the world will mirror that doubt. But when you begin to stand with yourself, quietly, firmly, without needing permission, everything changes. You stop chasing what was never meant for you. You stop holding on to what no longer aligns. You stop seeking outside what already exists within. This is not a sudden transformation. It is a practice, a daily returning, a continuous remembering. Some days you will forget. Some days you will fall back into old patterns. But now you are aware, and awareness always brings you back to your center, back to your truth, back to yourself. And in that return, again and again, you begin to build something unshakable, a quiet confidence, a steady peace, a deep sense of knowing that no matter what changes around you, you will not lose yourself again. Because you are no longer searching for love. You are becoming it.